that don't drain as quickly. And here, that drill field, unfortunately, one of the casualties, so to speak, of that heavy rain. You're not going to be out there doing any kind of recreation or any of those drill practices for the coming hours. Augusta and Rockingham counties here in between Staunton and Harrisonburg, east of I-81 under a flash flood warning. This includes the city of Grottoes until 8 o'clock local time. And we've been watching strong storms around Lynchburg as well. So plenty of active weather across the state of Virginia this evening, Mike. And we're talking the severe dangers, the strong winds, perhaps some hail, plenty of lightning. But the water is really causing problems. This storm also not moving very much.
So those slow-moving ones are always the toughest, that's for sure. Thank you, Alex. Well, nearly a year after Hurricane Irma decimated this Duck Key hotel, the doors are finally open. Isn't that nice to see? The Hawks Cay Resort underwent a $50 million renovation, completely gutting and renovating the rooms, as well as adding new restaurants. The resort had to lay a lot of staff off after the storm, but was able to hire back 200 employees before today's reopening. Like to see great stories like that, but you also got to think, Dr. Neb, it took them a long time.
Yeah.
Boy, when you get big, powerful storms like this that hit, it takes a long time to get back on your feet.
Yeah, and I really feel for the folks in the Keys. The tourism industry down there, I always interacted with them when I was director of the Hurricane Center. Every year we'd get together in May, and they always were very proactive in putting safety first for their visitors, and the hotel industry, tourism industry really took ownership of that issue because it's not only good for safety, it's good for business. And they know that they're hurricane prone down there, but they also know how beautiful a place they have, and they want people to know when they're open for business. So go visit if you all possibly can.
Usually the folks that you sound like you've worked for the Convention Visitors Bureau. Let's talk about Florida, because so many people that visit there are not from Florida, may not be familiar with tropical weather. You've got your eye on Florida again for the Labor Day weekend. Yeah, everybody in the Keys, everybody in Florida, all around hurricane-prone areas, you know we're at the peak of the season, and we've got a map that's starting to look more like September, isn't it? It's not just the Pacific that's lit up, but it's the Atlantic as well. So for once, Mike, I'm going to start with the Atlantic because there's enough to talk about. It hasn't been the case for a while. First, let's go out east. This is where we have potential tropical cyclone 6 that is just off the coast of Africa. Now, again, this is an option the Hurricane Center utilizes when there's a high chance of formation in the next 48 hours and it's time to put up watches and warnings. Well, the Cabo Verde Islands are going to perhaps feel tropical storm conditions, so it's time to put a warning up for them. So that's why the advisories are being issued, even though it's not yet a depression or storm yet, but it's likely to become one. 90% chance of that happening. Here's where the warnings are in the southern islands of the Cabo Verde Islands, and then here's the track forecast, forecasting it to become a tropical storm by the time it passes the islands. So this is really quick formation. The good news about quick formation, not good for the islands there, but the chances of it turning before affecting other land areas is pretty high, but it is forecast to become a hurricane, and we got a long time to watch that one. We got our tropical wave over the Caribbean that is being sheared right now, but once it gets to the Gulf of Mexico, when we get to the latter part of the holiday weekend into next week, that's when it has a chance of developing. So the Hurricane Center has started mentioning this in their outlook today, giving it a 10% chance of formation over the next 5 days, but not really in the next 2 or 3. It's not until next week where it has a small chance of forming in the Gulf of Mexico. I want to skip over to the Pacific now because we have an incredible event over the last 24 hours. Last night at this time, Hurricane Norman was barely a hurricane at 75 miles an hour. Now it's 150 miles per hour, one of the most rapidly intensifying hurricanes that we've seen. It's another in the long list of Cat 4s and 5s in the Eastern and Central Pacific this year. Maybe it's finally starting to level off. But my goodness, so this might become a Cat 5, has a chance to do it. Fortunately, it's doing all of this away from land, and it's going to be headed generally westward. It'll go up and down in intensity as these major hurricanes often do. By next week, should be weakening, and hopefully it will continue this right-hand turn and not get anywhere near to Hawaii, Mike and Alex. So, and that's not even everything. I didn't even talk about Miriam that's farther out into the Central Pacific. That's going to miss Hawaii as well. And Norman is something. Doubled its wind speed in one day.
And more than doubled its energy. That thing is powerful.
Wild stuff. Dr. Neb, thank you.
All right, much more ahead on tonight's show. When we come back, a stormy holiday weekend coming as the tropics come alive. We'll discuss the potential formation with Dr. Neb.
Well, the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season only a week and a half away, and right on cue, the basin is lighting up.
Yeah, one tropical wave in the Caribbean, though, really has our attention. Hurricane expert Dr. Rick Knapp is going to go in depth on why this is a system to watch over the upcoming holiday weekend.
And regardless of development, a stormy weekend looms for Florida. We break down why multiple dangers are likely up and down the southeast coast.
Plus, as this system enters the Gulf of Mexico, it could intensify. We'll tell you why the eastern Gulf is a hot spot when it comes to tropical storm and hurricane formation.
This just the beginning of a very active stretch in the Atlantic. See why all eyes will be on the tropics for weeks to come. It's all next on Weather Underground. And yes, another active night of weather underway. We're in the lab tonight keeping an eye on that radar for you. I'm Mike Bettis.
And I'm Alex Wilson. It was quite the lightning show in Le Mars, Iowa last night. We saw plenty of activity across the plains. This may have been the night before, actually, but look at this thing. This storm. You can see the anvil cloud where it spreads out at the top. Outside of this, some clear blue sky, but inside this, a lot going on. It's like near constant lightning. And we've seen some lightning and some really big rain problems across parts of the mid-Atlantic and southeast, including the rain problems here at Virginia Tech. You're looking at the campus located in Blacksburg, Virginia, and that brown stuff you see out on that nice green field, that's water that's ponded up on the drill field. So they've seen some issues with the water there. And we've even got a flash flood warning for Blacksburg areas down towards Radford. Here's the big picture on the radar. So West Virginia, Western Virginia, as well as western parts of North Carolina seeing a lot of the activity. But we have seen a few thunderstorms fire up areas east of 81 in Virginia. But let's start right along the I-81 corridor here from Blacksburg down towards Pulaski. Montgomery and Roanoke counties are under a severe thunderstorm warning. We'll watch for gusty winds as well as the threat for maybe some small hail, but I'd be most concerned about the wind tonight and the rain. And the rain is not really moving much. We've already got a flash flood warning in the area, and heavy rain continues to fall. Here in Galax, that's a city, and then Carroll and Grayson counties here in southwestern Virginia. They're concerned about an earthen dam that may fail, and they've already evacuated people south or downstream, I should say, of that dam. And they've seen some really heavy rain, with rain continuing. Now, it's not as heavy as it once was, but still at least light to moderate rain continues to fall over the area. Amherst County here, north and east of Lynchburg, Virginia, under a severe thunderstorm warning. Again, I'd be concerned about that potential for strong winds along with the incredibly heavy downpours that could easily take down trees. Flash flooding could be an issue here as well. And flash flood warning is in effect northeast of Staunton, southeast of Harrisonburg. This is Augusta and Rockingham counties in the state of Virginia. So if you're getting off I-81 in some of these communities, could encounter water on those roadways. If you live in this area and you're home, tonight's not the night to be running out to the grocery store. There's a lot of rain and we could be dealing with water-covered roadways. Future radar telling the story. Those storms slowly shift east, but a lot of heavy rain still yet to come across parts of western Virginia and southern West Virginia by tomorrow morning. Now we're watching eastern Pennsylvania with some scattered showers and thunderstorms. The best chance for the severe stuff today, where we've seen the storms at this point, western section, south and western parts of Virginia, as well as eastern and southern West Virginia. Mike?
Once in the Midwest, it's flooding. That's the big issue. This is Rock Springs, Wisconsin, where the river's going out of its banks here. And that meant in the middle of the night that we had water rescues here, as first responders are forced to hop into the boats and literally go door to door to wake people up and get them to higher ground. That's the middle of the night. That's a really scary situation. You're asleep. You have no idea what's going on. Outside your window is water. And then you quickly just got to collect your thoughts and out you go, right? More opportunities for flooding rain comes our way through the Midwest, probably through next week. Multiple rounds of heavy rain comes in. Look at this area that's highlighted in yellow. That's the area right there where 3 to 5 inches of rain comes over the next week. And locally, some area could get more than that. And what it means is the images that we saw there could repeat themselves. So this map is flash flood guidance. Color is all you really need to pay attention to. Where you have yellow and orange on the map, flash flood guidance is low, meaning we're giving you some guidance as to how much rain will cause flooding. Generally, it's going to be these two categories right here. 2 inches to half an inch of rain in 1 hour's time is going to cause flooding here in the upper Midwest. So for many of you, you live near a creek or stream. you're going to watch the water levels come up again. You live in a low-lying neighborhood, you're going to see water fill up in your neighborhood. Intersections could fill up with water. Going through tomorrow morning, this area highlighted in green, really from the Tennessee Valley up through I-35 here into Minneapolis, watching for the possibility of some flooding. Now more intense area here from the Arrowhead all the way down to St. Louis as we go into Saturday morning. Then we go into Sunday. We're going to have more opportunities for flooding for us still across the Midwest, but includes this area now from Dodge City back toward Grand Rapids, Michigan. So a couple of different times we'll see heavy rain and flooding come in. I was just really concerned in particular about these areas right here, Iowa, northern Illinois, and then portions of Wisconsin as well. So that's an area we're going to focus on for at least the next week. But then we're also going to see some potential issues with flooding, heavy rain across the Deep South, including around New Orleans. 9 inches of rain here in the Big Easy this month alone, about 3 inches above average. Here in French Quarter, roads are wet. We've had showers today. It's 77 and humid for us right now. But we are watching the next player come into the Gulf of Mexico. And by early next week, could we have a low pressure forming here at the Louisiana coast? It's possible, but just a ton of atmospheric moisture. That's what this map is showing you. Areas of orange and yellow, high amounts of moisture in the atmosphere, and that means higher chances that you get some rain. Before it gets there, though, we've got opportunities, Dr. Nav, for some storms to form over Puerto Rico. They've done that today because of a little disturbance tonight in the Caribbean.
Yeah, they're used to this. I mean, this is the wet season, it's hurricane season, and it's the time of year where these tropical waves come through the Atlantic and Caribbean every 2, 3, or 4 days. But this one is a little more moist, a little bigger of a rainmaker than they've seen over the last month or two in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So all day today, it's been raining hard off and on in various spots. But there's our new circle on the map highlighting that tropical wave that's come all the way from Africa and wasn't all that interesting over the deep tropical Atlantic, but as it got to the Caribbean, it really ramped up in the last 24 hours in terms of the shower and thunderstorm activity. On the water vapor imagery, you can see this upper level trough that is providing a lot of wind shear, and that's going to keep it from developing over the next few days as it goes over the Greater Antilles and the Bahamas. But in the meantime, it's a wet system. Let's zoom in on the last few visible images of the day. The tropical wave axis, the low to mid-level troughing, the turning is kind of aligned with the Dominican Republic, but the moist flow on the backside of it really hammering the northeastern Caribbean. And if you look in close, really heavy thunderstorms off to the northeast of Puerto Rico. They have a special marine warning out right there. So it's a dangerous boating situation throughout the northeastern Caribbean, and also the risk of heavy rains, flash flooding, and even mudslides for today, tonight, and all the way into most of tomorrow for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And then this will get even more of a concern over Dominican Republic and Haiti over the next few days. So don't need a name, Alex, to have a big rainmaker and a dangerous flood situation.
Right, and we're going to be watching what's going on there in Puerto Rico, Hispaniola closely. But then we get to the mainland, and we've got to talk about the second phase of this system, and that's going to be impacts not just in terms of rain and cloud cover, but other impacts up and down the East Coast on what, of course, we know is shaping up to be a big beach weekend. It's Labor Day. You know, there's a couple weekends that you can count on those beaches packed. Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. And here we are at Labor Day for many, the last hurrah, but it could be problematic out and in the water.
Yeah, residents and visitors alike in the state of Florida, flock to the beaches, and this weekend is one of the busy times. And first, I want to tell you what's not coming to Florida. This is not going to be a depression or storm. It doesn't look like coming onto the east coast of Florida. So here's where the tropical wave is now over the northern Caribbean. And you watch the depiction in the model of the colors. It doesn't really organize, doesn't consolidate. So it'll be over Florida, thereabouts, western Cuba, on Labor Day or so. But look at the white lines. These are the equal pressure. So it's low pressure to the south. It'll be enhanced by the presence of that wave with the high off to the northeast. All of these lines are pointed toward Florida. When you have onshore flow like this, that's when you enhance the rip current problem. Okay.
So even in areas where we may not be getting any rain or cloud cover, we could be having big problems in the water, looking all the way up to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, moderate risk.
Yeah, so that onshore flow is going to be not just into Florida, but into Georgia and to some extent into the Carolinas around that high. So that's where the high risk of rip currents will be. Even if the weather's good, the ocean could be dangerous. Check with lifeguards.
All right, we look back at Miami, another location that not only has the rip current current danger, but perhaps more in the way of some soggy times ahead. Let's get a look at some of these beach forecasts up and down the coast.
Well, let's take a look at Miami Beach. This is an area where you have direct east-facing beaches on barrier islands, and the winds are going to be coming pretty much straight in. So on the east coast of Florida, where you have a beach immediately on the Atlantic Ocean, it's not going to be as a problem inside the bays, but on the immediate beach-facing, Atlantic-facing beaches, that's where the rip current risk could be a problem. Now, if you're farther north, don't think you don't have this problem, because the onshore flow will be continuing in central and northern Florida. Daytona Beach, same sort of thing. Barrier islands, nearly perpendicular flow, and that's what maximizes the rip current risk. And then if you go farther up the coast to Myrtle Beach, now this is where the flow will be turning around the high. So unfortunately, that also means a good chance of a direct onshore flow to Myrtle Beach, and the weather will probably be pretty good up there, but the ocean could be dangerous if you don't follow lifeguard instructions. Deadly hazard rip currents.
Yeah, and speaking of good weather, bad weather, Mike, you got to talk about where we could be looking at some heavier rain showers.
It's going to be rough for a lot of folks when you're dealing with these kind of conditions over the course of maybe a day or two or three even. So for a place like Florida, heavy rain threats coming your way, and it's going to be a bummer at the beach, that's for sure. Let's take you into the weekend and show you what happens, because for a lot of you, the unfortunate thing is you're washed out. There's a look at what happens for us as we go through the weekend all along the Gulf Coast, and certainly will include places like Pensacola or Panama City, Biloxi, right through coastal Texas even. So a place like Galveston, we could be dealing with the possibility of some periods of heavy rain. Let's take a look at what's going on for us here into the weekend with slow-moving storms that go really, I think, all the way down to South Padre Island. So a lot of different areas where it could be a real mess for you. And that's an unfortunate thing, because the timing is really everything, it seems like. When you're talking about the last hurrah for summer, you want to get out there, you want to enjoy maybe some last beach time when the temperature's still warm, the water temperatures
and
are still
also
warm.
condos and hotel rooms that you've paid for now.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you've got the money on the line. Well, Chuck Carricosa, meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Miami, joins us now to discuss the impacts we could expect to see in Florida. You know, Chuck, Dr. Knabb just mentioned the rain, or the rip currents. Mike talked about the rain. Two of the things that those beachgoers don't necessarily want to see this weekend.
Exactly, and unfortunately with this, there is going to be an increase in moisture in the area, so that is going to add to the increased chances of rain here, especially as we move into the latter portion of the holiday weekend and then into early next week as well.
Chuck, are there certain areas of Florida that you feel with this event could be more susceptible to flooding?
Basically, well, here in South Florida, you know, we've had, you know, some rain and stuff. So what we're looking at basically here is, with any increased amount of moisture here, we are looking at, you know, the possibility of some localized flooding, especially in the low-lying areas and the poor drainage areas as well.
And what about the rip current risk? I mean, do we have a significantly greater problem than your normal onshore flow with the high off in the western Atlantic? When a wave comes through, does it enhance the pressure gradient in a way that concerns you?
Yes, it does. It will increase the threat of rip currents here, especially as we move into later in the weekend and into early next week, especially with the east-southeasterly flow increasing as well.
You know, something we often talk about is a challenge for the National Weather Service local offices when you've got a lot of visitors coming into the area. Do you work with lifeguards or other organizations that may be in more direct contact with the visitors to let them know of the threats?
Yes, we do. We work with local ocean rescue units up and down our coastline here, and we work with them extensively, actually, to you know, help you know, communicate the rip current threat across the region.
Chuck Carricosa here with the National Weather Service office in Miami. Chuck, thank you very much. It's going to be a tough weekend, unfortunately, for all the folks that want to be out there and enjoying some time outside. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you know, there's going to be a lot of inside time, family bonding, puzzles, Uno, things like that. You know, you got to do it. Uno, you know, it brings families together. It can tear you apart, too, though, if you don't play your cards right, so to speak.
I feel like you're speaking from experience.
I grew up on Uno. I love that game.
Yeah. Something tells me Dr.
It
Knabb would crush us in Uno.
No, it's all about the luck of the draw.
I know,
really
but
is.
I got extra wild draw fours in my pocket.
I used to get really bitter as a kid, though, because I'm really competitive.
I get really bitter as an adult.
It's a competitive game.
Well, we got color coding on our outlooks. Yeah, we got yellow, we got orange, we got red. This one is yellow. This is a 10% low chance of formation of this Caribbean tropical wave, because it's not going to form in the Caribbean, not going to form over the Bahamas, we don't think. It's over the Gulf of Mexico, where it has some chance out to 5 days, but it might even have beyond 5 days. So it's going to be a next week thing they're going to be watching for, maybe a depression or storm.
There's active weather between here and there. We don't give people a sense that nothing's going to happen between there, and it just won't necessarily be tropical formation.
Right. There'll be plenty of moisture, a lot of rain along the way, probably maybe some flash floods and mudslides along the way in the greater Antilles. So don't want to downplay that. And then the rip current risk we just talked about. But let's pick it up on Monday when the tropical wave is aligned over Florida and western Cuba. And we'll go from there. The colors are the low-level spin, and if you see a consolidation of yellows and oranges in a tight spot, that would mean it's trying to spin up. This particular run of the European model, it doesn't do a whole lot of that, but it does stay over the Gulf for a good portion of next week, maybe along the northern Gulf Coast. And then if we look at the GFS model, it is now doing something. It wasn't doing anything in previous runs in previous days. So it means we got to watch it. It could get its act together if it spends enough time over the Gulf and can get organized over the very warm water.
We've always got to keep our eye on these things. Late August, early September. Right?
We've had sneaky ones that form in the Gulf this time of year before.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing is, like, Florida sticks out there like a sore thumb. So we're always an easy target in Florida.
Well, yeah, they're what is one of their greatest benefits is also making them very, very prone to this.
Curse and a blessing at the same time.
That's right. That's right. Well, coming up on Weather Underground, they're like Spider-Man. As this system enters the Gulf of Mexico, it could intensify, and we're going to find out why the eastern Gulf is a hot spot when it comes to tropical storm and hurricane formation. Stick with us.
A hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, joins us now to talk more about this, because there are hints now that something's going to move its way from near Puerto Rico into the Gulf of Mexico, and the Hurricane Center is now eyeing it.
Yeah, and it's not that mess over the Gulf that you see there now, even though it is moist and unstable there, and that's an idea of what the Gulf is like right now as this tropical wave eventually makes its way in that direction. Right now, it's really dousing the northeastern Caribbean. Compared to 24 hours ago, this is a lot more convectively active, a lot more shower and thunderstorm activity. So we got a flash flood risk and a mudslide risk here from the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, to Dominican Republic and Hispaniola. The thing right now, though, is because of all this wind shear with this upper level trough and all of this land, there's some ocean, there's some land, but the large islands would kind of interrupt the development along with the wind shear. So it's not here that the development chances are there, Mike. It's when it gets up in here. And the Gulf of Mexico waters are ultra warm. I mean, the warmest in the basin. And it's very unstable. So what you're getting is adding to the moisture and instability that's already there. And it's just a question of whether or not this can take advantage of the environment that it will find itself in.
And we'd be talking, roughly 5 days or so from now? Anything can happen.
Yeah. When you are talking the chance for development not even really beginning until, say, Tuesday, when it gets into the Gulf, and then it's got a few days over the Gulf. A lot can happen that we can't really pinpoint right now.
Yeah, so keep watching it. We'll keep our eye on it for you. But, folks, the thing is, it's just going to be poor conditions from Florida, probably to Texas, with heavy rain over the next week or so. Maybe if not more than that, Alex. Even.
Yeah, and you know what's in between Florida and Texas? Biloxi, Mississippi. Almost right smack in the middle, I would argue, along the Gulf Coast between Florida and Texas. So if you're traveling here, if you live here, this is a spot you got to watch because of that favorability of storms to develop, or at least strengthen if they're already developed, where they're in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, and so let's take a look at what the models are doing with the system that Mike and I just showed you. So it's representing with the colors what the spin in the lower levels of the atmosphere is like. And it's very disorganized. All of these colors in the northeastern Caribbean are a representation of the wave. And it's going westward to the south of the high. So watch as we go through the holiday weekend how these colors consolidate a little bit in the vicinity of South Florida and western Cuba when we're on about Labor Day. So then it's after that time, Alex, that it has some chance to develop. And that's where the Hurricane Center is highlighting a 10% chance within 5 days. And we're just now getting into that 5-day period. Maybe it's only Thursday and this is out to Tuesday. But when it's in the Gulf, then you see it consolidating somewhat. It's trying. This is not a clear sign that this is going to become a depression or storm. It's a sign that it will have a chance. And that's just the European model. And remember yesterday, it was really the only model doing this.
Right.
Now, if you look at the GFS model, we'll go through really quickly. You'll see it does something very similar now. By Monday, it's got it in the vicinity of Florida. and now it starts to show a little bit more signs of life over the eastern and northern Gulf as we go through the middle part of next week. So now if it stays farther south, this could be a West Gulf problem too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's a wet time for the Gulf of Mexico next week.
All right, so let's open up the case. The Gulf versus Labor Day week. It's like a Law and Order thing. The Gulf, it's prime for development. Labor Day weekend, it's prime for people going to these beaches. Also, turning off the phone and saying, you know what, I'm going to leave it behind. I'm only using it for Insta pictures. I'm not looking at any information. But because these could develop quickly, and history has showed us they have developed quickly, you really got to pay attention.
Yeah, one of the sneaky things about how the Gulf is going to play a role here, trying to work against your Labor Day week, is that the system's not going to have a chance to develop until it gets in the Gulf. And so this could be one of those things that's perceived as a last-minute surprise formation, but we've had that happen before. Just think about Hermine 2016 became a depression near the Florida Keys, and then a storm, and then made landfall as a hurricane. And we put up a hurricane watch when I was down at the Hurricane Center when it was a depression.
Right.
And people going, what? Hurricane watch for a depression?
For depression.
Because we were forecasting strengthening, and that happened. All happened in the Gulf of Mexico from a system that we were just tracking as Invest 99L. People didn't think much of it until it was right on their doorstep.
And it literally was right on the doorstep.
Then Lee in 2011 formed as a tropical storm in the middle of the Gulf. Wasn't anything outside the Gulf. Became a subtropical storm coming ashore in Louisiana, and was a rainmaker all the way up the East Coast because of its remnants getting caught up with the frontal boundary. So don't think the Gulf of Mexico might not be your problem somewhere inland later next week or the following weekend. And then Humberto formed as a weak trough over the western Gulf the next day. It was a landfalling hurricane on the North Texas coast. That got together in less than a day. So don't think a measly looking system in the Gulf can't get its act together and cause more trouble than you think.
Right. So stay tuned, pay attention. Don't cancel your Labor Day plans, but at least watch it.
Don't tune out.
Thanks. Absolutely. Mike, over to you.
All right, thank you both very much. We continue after the break. Our top story, potential tropical threat in the Gulf of Mexico next week. We're back to go in depth on this. We've got to check out the scene here, coast of France. Watch this. Big old nasty shelf cloud coming in with a big thunderstorm. And look at all the lightning underneath it too.
Yeah, coloring of the sunset almost makes it look like a big dust cloud, but this is just a good old shelf cloud here in France. So overseas, they get in on some of that real pretty but a little scary weather.
We were like 2 people on the beach, maybe. It looked like they were headed to buildings, so.
The French listen to warnings, apparently, so all languages.
Maybe we should take a lesson from the French, right?
That'd be a good idea.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. You're watching Weather Underground on a Thursday night. Storms topping our headlines this evening.
Yeah, I want to take you right in the heart of the country. St. Louis tonight. We are looking at the arch and could be looking at some wet weather for the hours to come. We've got a complex of thunderstorms moving through sections right now of southern Missouri and northern Arkansas. So a little outside of, say, St. Louis. Most of the action, though, at this point is focused well farther to the east or well off to the east across portions of Virginia. Want to talk about this area. This area was under a severe thunderstorm warning. Now it's all about the water threat because of the persistent heavy rainfall that's been focused over Blacksburg and points south. Radford is the city under the warning. Then we've got Montgomery and Pulaski counties. In those counties, we've got Blacksburg, we've got Christiansburg, and we've got Radford. So we've got 2 universities, Virginia Tech and Radford included within this one. This warning goes until 11:30, and some reports that Duck Pond Road, there, the main thoroughfare on campus at Virginia Tech, some areas of that flooded out. So don't want to be driving out there this evening. If you're already back in your dorm room, stay put, work on some homework. There's an idea. Hey, Charlottesville, you are under a severe thunderstorm warning at this point. Albemarle County under a warning as well. Potential for strong gusty winds and very heavy rain that will come down with this one. We've seen heavy rain moving out of Lynchburg and up towards the Amherst area. And take a look at all the lightning strikes. So even though this isn't warned, it's a dangerous storm, bringing with it a lot of electricity. You don't want to be outside if you are hearing thunder. Wait till that storm passes to go get the mail or, take the dog out for an evening walk. We get you into the evening hours, and a lot of that wet weather is focused up in the northern parts of West Virginia, so we will see some of the storms fizzle out by tomorrow morning. It's southeastern Pennsylvania where we could see some showers and some even heavier rain. Here's today's severe risk zone. So we've got areas from Charleston to Charlottesville, so that's 64 corridor, the 81 corridor, say from about Harrisonburg down to Roanoke, and then as far east as Richmond, Virginia. That's another area to watch. Mike, we've been talking about portions of the plains, the Midwest being especially drenched with water.
All you have to do is take a look at Springfield, Missouri for evidence of that. Tons of water on the roads here, tons of water in the neighborhoods, your driveways filled up, and then you see the cars just splashing right on through it. Careful, folks. Watch your speed and when you see water on the roads, because hydroplaning is a very real thing, and you can lose control of your car before you know it, right? Now, the flood threat, well, we think it could stay with us for the foreseeable future, at least for maybe the next week or so. Here's a look at the forecast for 3 to 5 inches of rain here in the heartland. Boy, I-80, we're right in the middle of that, aren't we? There'll be some areas through Wisconsin. We watch for some really heavy rain, and we've had big-time flood issues for us in Wisconsin. This map shows you the flash flood guidance. How much rain do you need over 1 hour's time to get flooding? For most of it's going to be 2 inches or less. Okay, a lot of yellow, a lot of orange on this map, indicating that it's not going to take a whole lot. A regular summertime thunderstorm can offer you up a quick inch, just like that. Before you know it, you're flooding. This area highlighted in green, most likely through tomorrow morning to see some flooding. The most likely area within that area is right here. Maybe right along, say, I-35 for you here.